So you're ready to get started writing some blog posts. Maybe it's your first blog post, maybe it's your 15th, maybe you're like me and it's like your, I don't know, 200th. Regardless of what number of blog you are on, everyone could always use some writing tips because you can always get better. That's something I tell my kids when we're taking GMAS, because we just got done with like the whole testing thing, and they have writing tests now, which like we did not have when I was a kid, so I feel a little bit bad for them. Although I love writing, so you know, whatever. But I always tell them, you are not, they'll like be like, Miss Davis, I'm done. I'm like, you are not done. You are not ever done when you are writing, because there's always something you can improve. You can go back, you can fix something, you can add something. So in the spirit of that, we're gonna talk about some things that you can do to improve your blog post writing. Some of these I've learned from books, other ones I have learned from actual just experience, because I've written a lot of blog posts. I've also written a couple books. They're up here, like Level Up Your Teacher Business. And over here, The Happier Teacher Life. And also one about music lessons you can do on Zoom, which you probably are not interested in, but if you are, you know, all of those things are available on Amazon. And so I've done a lot of writing in my time. I write a lot. I have a couple things to share, not a ton, but a couple things.
Hey, Editing Becca here. If you click the link down below, then you will be able to grab a whole huge list of content ideas for your blog, and there will be more things coming soon, so make sure you check back to that folder after you have gotten access to it.
These aren't in any super particular order except the first one, because the first one is indeed the most important, which is why I put it first, and that is always serve first. No matter what you're doing, because I'm assuming you're here because you are writing your blog post to try to sell your TPT products, because you want to sell your TPT products. Even as you're selling TPT products, always serve first. Always come not from a place of like, you should buy my product, but come from a place of, I want to help you. And maybe that solution is my product, but the point is that I'm coming at it from a place of, I want to help people. I want this blog post to be good, not, oh, I want to make money. Even though it's not like a tangible thing you can do, just always remember that the goal here is to help people. Even when I'm talking about products, I always try to have pieces in there that are helpful and pieces in there that they can do even if they don't buy the product, because you know, not everyone's gonna buy the product, and that's fine too. So always come from a place of serving first, and if you do that, then you will be able to attract people who actually genuinely enjoy your advice, and not people who are like, ugh, I don't want this product, there's nothing helpful for me in this blog post, I'm gonna click out. Even when you're selling, you can still be helpful. Okay? Okay. All right, now we have absolutely no particular order, but the next one is to use short paragraphs. Writing online is not the same as writing a book. When you write a book, or you write like thinking like an essay that you wrote, you know, in high school or college, you wrote chunks, like you wrote big old paragraphs and you went deep into all the details and all those things. People on the internet don't want to do that, especially if they're like reading on their phones, if they're reading on their computer. If they see that big huge block of black writing, they're probably just gonna click off and not finish it. People on the internet are typically skimmers, so even though yes, we want to write good stuff, you also want to make sure that the paragraphs are short enough that it is easy to skim and it's not intimidating coming from somebody who maybe isn't such a huge reader. So have those shorter paragraphs in there so that you have like plenty, and I like to skip a line in between mine as well, and that just gives you a little bit more white space on the page and is less intimidating. Number 3 is along with that, and that is use your headings. When you write a blog post, you can have those headings, and again, people are skimming. If they read half your blog post, you're doing pretty well. So use your headings to really help break up your pieces into chunks. I use the plugin Yoast SEO, which should have been its own tip, but you know what, here we are. I use just the free version of it, but one thing that it always says is that it wants you to have like 300 or less words per section with like a heading in between, which sometimes is annoying because sometimes I just have more to say than that. But it's a good idea to think about things like that and think like, okay, I don't want this to be, you know, too big of a section, and so I need to break it up after a while. That was 3. This is number 4. Number 4 is the last one I'll say kind of in that little spot, and that is to use images. If you have relevant images, make sure you put them on there. So if you're talking about a product, post a picture of the product. If you're talking about a craft, post a picture of the craft. But if you don't have relevant pictures, then just make some graphics that you can add on there. I like to make Pinterest sized graphics, so like nice vertical ones, so that I can easily pin them to Pinterest. And I typically have, you know, 2 or 3 per blog post. That way they break up the sea of text, as well as giving people, you know, the chance to pin to Pinterest, or giving myself the chance to pin to Pinterest because they're already the right size. Number 5 is vary the sentence length of your writing. So if you are writing and all of your sentences are the same length, it starts to feel like kind of robotic and a little bit weird. So instead, you want to vary your sentence lengths. You want some sentences that are nice and long and take up quite a bit of space on your blog post. And then you want some that are short. Then you also want a few that are in the middle, so that it kind of, you know, just sounds more melodic. It's more how you speak, and it just sounds more natural and flows together better. You can think really hard about this. An exercise I did actually with my kiddos. I know I teach music, but I end up teaching all of the things. Don't ask. An exercise I did with my kids when we were working on writing one time is I had them write a paragraph, and then we color coded the sentences. So if they had 3 words or less, it was purple. And if it was 4 to 7 words, then it was green. And so that way, once they colored it, they could see if they had all the same sentence lengths or if they were different. And so having that was a really good visual representation. I wouldn't suggest that you sit there and be like, oh, now I need a 3-word sentence. But just, you know, as you're writing, think some need to be short, some need to be long. On the internet, you can have 1-word sentences. That's okay. My 2nd grade teacher did not allow me to do that, but the internet does allow me to do it. My 2nd grade teacher also told me I could not start a sentence with a conjunction. And I remember one time I got real upset because I was reading Little House on the Prairie, and the sentence started with the word but it was the first word of the sentence. And I took it up to her and I was like, they started with a conjunction. I was like, they started with but. Why can't I do that? And she was like, well, when you write your own books, you can do what you want. Now I've written my own book, so I do what I want. But it's much more how you speak, and so it's totally fine on the internet. On the internet, we're writing the way we speak. So 1 word, 2 words, those things are fine. Just make sure they're not like all 1 word, because that would also sound weird. So just, you know, vary the sentence. Like some should be long, some should be short, just not too much of the same thing. Number 6 is more of a practical thing, and that is create an outline. I thought that everybody did this, but I suggested it one time when I was talking about, I don't know, maybe not having writer's block. If you're having writer's block, an outline is your best friend, because once you have an outline, you just fill in the middle, especially if it's something that like you've taught before or you've done before and you know how to do it. Just create an outline. So I actually am not super fancy, and so I don't bother to make an outline like writing it down on a piece of paper. But what I do is when I write my blog post, I first put all my headings, and those headings serve as my outline, because I know like, okay, I just took her bone because she was getting kind of loud, and I was like, oh, I'll throw it into the hallway, and then she'll go in the hallway. But I threw it underneath the cabinet. Now she's not gonna get it out. She's gonna freak out. We better round this up pretty quickly. So what am I talking about? Oh, outlines. So for outlines, I just like to write my headings down and use that as my outline, because once I have those down, that I know pretty much what I'm gonna say. And it makes, oh, she got it. Good job. Could you take it anywhere except right next to my camera? That'd be great. Create an outline. This is really helpful because then you don't get stuck as much as you are writing. As you're writing, it's just like, oh, type, 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 type. And it makes life a lot easier, instead of like sitting there staring at me like, oh, what should we talk about next? It helps you organize your thoughts before you start writing, which is very, very valuable, especially again, if you struggle with writer's block. I don't believe in writer's block. We can have a whole video about that if you're interested. I don't believe in writer's block, but outlines help. Number 7 is add some stories. There is a reason that people love Harry Potter. People love Disney, and it's because they tell stories. Humans connect with stories. So if you can add stories to your blog post, it's going to help people so much. Like I gave you the random story about myself and my 2nd grade teacher Mrs. Nation, and all of those things that happen in my little teeny tiny town in Iowa that we used to live in. And that helped you to, you know, connect hopefully a little bit with me, because you're imagining me now being like, you know, 7 and being all like concerned about this book that is published and in the library. And so having those stories help you to engage with the person, and also just helps it be more interesting. It's less boring if you can put a story in there, because people like stories. As soon as you're like, let me tell you a story, everyone kind of like instinctively leans in a little bit and just really makes it fun. I used to watch Pat Flynn during the lockdown, did daily lives for an hour every day, which was insane. And he would have time called story time. Anytime he'd tell a story, he'd like put on some story music, and he would say like, we're gonna have a story time. And everybody, you know, instinctively goes like this. Even I do it as I'm telling you that we're gonna have a story time. So add those relevant stories in where you can. You don't have to add irrelevant stories, but just any little tidbit of, you know, oh, this kid said something really funny, or, you know, this happened or that happened. This isn't related, so don't do this where I'm telling you completely unrelated things, but it was so funny. We were taking our rhythm test, and so I had them, I was like, all right, circle the quarter note, circle the eighth notes, now circle the rest. As in like circle the quarter rest. And I had at least 3 kids who circled all, they were like, circle the rest. And I was like, yeah, circle the rest. And they circled all of the rhythms. And I was like, oh, no. Circle the rhythm, that is a rest. That's what I want you to circle. So don't do that until really random stories I just want to share, because it was hilarious. But do tell stories, because stories make blog posts more interesting. It helps them come to life, and it helps us kind of like connect a little bit with the author. So it's not like, oh, hey, this robot is writing whatever, but it's actually a little more entertaining. Number 7 should have gone up there already, and that is use bullet points. You can use bullet points. WordPress has like a quote feature you can use. Use all of those like formatting things. Use bold, use italics, not a ton, but do use it enough so that it just kind of breaks up your text. Bullet points are especially helpful, especially for those people who are skimming. I like to sometimes have like bullet points, and then underneath that I'll actually explain each of those things. So I'll be like, here's the 3 things that you can do. 1, 2, 3. And then I'll have paragraphs explaining those 3, because some people like the paragraphs. Like, I am a person, like, if I'm reading your blog post, I'm reading every single word, and I will read the whole thing. Other people are not like this, and so other people appreciate having the bullet points. And so just having enough that you're like kind of allowing different audience members to get what they need is really helpful. And, you know, always be thinking about those skimmers. Number 8 is more of a process thing, and that is write your opening paragraph last. This is something I started doing actually in high school, because I would sit down to write an essay, and I had, you know, all of my bullet points. I knew what my point was, like, you know, my main thesis-ish. You know, I knew kind of what I wanted you to get out of it, but I, for some reason, would get stuck on the introduction. And that was always the sticking point for me. So I started just diving into the content, because I'm much better at that anyway. I am a person, if you ever meet me in person, I'm not a like small talk person. I'll say hi, you know, how are you? I hate when people ask how you are, because 90% of the time they don't actually care. And so they're just saying it like as a thing that they're saying, but they don't actually care. So you just kind of have to say, oh, I'm fine, because otherwise they're like, oh, I didn't actually want you to answer my question. Or when they say it, then they're like halfway down the hallway. I'm like, why did you bother to ask me a question if you're halfway down? I'm thinking too hard about it. Anyway, so for me, it's a lot easier to just jump into the content. Like, oh, we're talking about quarter rest. Here's how we do quarter rest. Blah, 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 blah. That's a lot easier to me than doing the introduction. And I found that after I finish the essay, it is so much easier to write the introduction, because now I know what I want you to get at it. Like, I'm a lot more clear about my thesis, because now I've written all this other stuff and I know kind of what's coming. I can foreshadow things. Like, I can just be a lot more organized with things if I write my first paragraph last. So that's how I like to write mine. I don't do this every single time, because sometimes I'm fine, but especially if I'm having a hard time and kind of feeling that like stuck and like, ugh, I don't know what to write, just dive in wherever you feel comfortable, and you can come back and do that part later. The next one is also a structure one. I'm looking around because I thought I still had this book. Maybe it's at my parents' house. I'll have to look next time I'm there. In high school, I had to read this book that I don't even remember what it's called anymore, but it was in AP Literature. Yes, AP Literature. And in AP Literature, we had to read this book, and it was basically like how to write an essay. And it had so many useful tips. Like, I was thinking about it the other day. I was like, man, I want to read that book. So I'm gonna have to find it and read it and remember what it's called also. But one of the most helpful things I found in that for my essays that I used all through high school, all through college, that I still use now for blog posts, is the structure of your essay. And so the way that they showed it was like a little diagram. So it was the introduction, your first paragraph is an upside down triangle. So you start really wide and then kind of bring it into your main point. So we start by talking about like general things, kind of get people interested, get people hooked, and bring it down into here's the most important thing you need to know. Then your paragraphs are chunks, they're rectangles, and so they look like rectangles. Here's my point, I'm talking about my point, I continue talking about my point, here's my point, I'm talking about my point, you know, etc. Then your conclusion is a regular triangle. I should make a graphic and not just do this, like this, where it starts specific and then gets more broad. So in your conclusion, you start with, you know, that's how you teach quarter rest, and then kind of make it more broad and relate it to other things kind of outside of the specific blog post. So now that you know how to use quarter rest, you can use the same process in order to teach other rhythms, whatever. And so every time I write something, I always think about it that way. We're starting really broad, I have my hook, and then I'm kind of bringing you into what I want to talk about. At the end, I'm starting with, yes, this is what we talked about, and we get more broad and back into the rest of the world. If you can think about it that way, I find it helps a lot just to have that visualization of like what it looks like. After I make my graphic, I might like print it out and put it somewhere because I feel like that would be useful. But super great. If you know the name of the book that has that tip in it, let me know down below. I'm so helpful. Here's a random book you should read. I read it 10 years ago. I have no idea what it is. You're welcome. And lastly is that if you want to be a better blog post writer, then you need to do two things. You need to read and you need to write. So reading is one of the best ways to become a better writer, because as you intake language, it gets easier for you to create language. You broaden your vocabulary, you get used to, if you're reading fiction, you get used to how people, you know, tell stories. If you're reading nonfiction, you get used to kind of like the format of that, and you can kind of notice, especially once you started writing blog posts, like start thinking as you're reading and thinking like, what do I like about this book? What do I not like about this book? Like how it's set up in the way that it is done. Those are all things that you can think about as you're reading. The more you read, the better you will write, because as you intake that good content, it will be easier for you. So I would always suggest that you are reading all of the time. I always have 2 or 3 books that I am working on at a time. Always a fiction and a nonfiction, and sometimes a third because I'm an overachiever. But it's something that's really fun. It's a good way to relax. It's a good way to save money because books take a long time to consume. So even if you're buying your books, it's, you know, like $15 for, you know, 2 weeks worth of fun, instead of $15 for, like, that wouldn't even buy you a movie ticket. So it helps you, you know, save money. You can enjoy it, especially with summer happening. Like, enjoy, read, have that. It also really helps you wind down at the end of the night. I cannot talk enough about how great reading is. Anyway, you're teachers, you should know that already. If you need some books to read, by the way, I have some videos on this channel and on my other channel talking about some of my favorite books, book reviews, all that kind of stuff. So if you need some stuff to kind of get ready, get started, maybe I should do like easy books to get into reading nonfiction. I don't know. Anyway, the other thing that you can do, so you can read, and then the other thing you need to do is write, because the more you practice, the better you will be. I know. The music teacher telling you to practice. How ironic. But I'm telling you right now, the more you write, the better you will be. I personally am trying to get even better at this habit. Currently, I've been focusing on just journaling, and journaling is great because you can just write about whatever the heck you want and nobody ever has to read it. Not that, you know, I always feel a little bad because I'm like, I wonder if my husband is wondering what I'm writing in here. But to be fully honest, he could read it, but it would be really boring because I mostly like figuring out my goals and figuring out how to make money and kind of like trying to organize my life. I just think really well in that like long-term, like long form content. And so I have been loving journaling, and I knew I loved journaling, so I've been trying to do that more. And I'm really good about it actually this year, so that's been great. And then I've been trying to just write a little bit more in addition to that. Working on my next book, working on some other things, about to start batching blog posts. This is something I can really tell when I am batching my blog posts, because y'all know I like to write a ton of blog posts in a short amount of time. And my first couple ones are kind of hard and maybe not my best, but the last couple ones are usually really great, and I can churn them out super quick, because by the time I've had that much practice in such a short amount of time, it gets so much easier. I would not suggest doing that if you're new to blogging, because you need that like repetitive practice, but if you've been doing it for a while, it helps a lot. So write, journal. You could do morning pages is a big thing. People just write for 3 pages in the morning. It's like a thing a lot of people do. I don't do that, but you could. You know, one thing I've started doing is like book summaries after I finish a book. After I finish a book, I'll write about my main takeaways and things that I liked and all of that kind of stuff, and that's been helpful. And just kind of like trying to think more and write more and do those things and produce the content. All right, Vanilla is staring at me, so I think that she needs something, and I think that I might need to go help her with whatever her doggy desires are. Do you want to come say hi? Hi. This is Vanilla. So all of that to say, another way that you can get better at blogging is by taking my blogging course. In there is one module about setting up your blog, and then the other modules talk all about writing tips, like writing blogs that actually people want to read. We talk about how to convert your readers into buyers. We talk about email lists. We talk about all of those things that you need to know. So whether you are brand new, or if you've already started but you need a little more help, it'll have plenty of stuff for you. I will leave it linked down below, and let me go deal with her and probably make some iced coffee, because that sounds really good. Thanks for watching. Bye.